Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carter.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carter, and today is June 19th, 2026. And tonight's episode is all about December 2026. Excuse me. Is Genesis mission preparing for the rapture? Or have we misread the documents? Now, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention on TikTok, but there are a few people making the rounds with information about the rapture and how the United States is preparing for it. And thus, this Genesis mission is being brought up, and people are thinking, oh my God, this is it. They don't know the time. And I had to do some information about the Genesis mission, and I went to their website, and I also went to Russia's websites to validate, because Russia doesn't care about posting any information about America. And I found out what exactly is going on. So personally, there's nothing to worry about. And every time when I see these videos, I start to freak out, and I keep forgetting that my health comes from the Lord. My well-being comes from the Lord. If Jesus is really coming, or we're getting raptured in December, so be it. What are we so worried about? But regardless, my job is to look for information and find out data. And I have over 50,000 books now, all on the esoteric, all on you name it, every religion you can possibly imagine, dating back to the Zoroastrian scrolls, or actually Sanskrit tablets. We've got so much information, and to dig through it all, it's not hard anymore to put that up into artificial intelligence and say, okay, well, what does the Bible say? Compare it to that. Compare it to these things that are happening. And lo and behold, it says, well, something different than what these people have seen. Now, this one person on TikTok used Gemini, the AI, to search for information. And the reason why they came up to this conclusion is because, well, they're studying it with end times prophecy, Book of Daniel, Revelation, etc. And naturally, if you're looking, you will fill in the blanks, and AI will do the same to please you, to get what you want. Well, I don't think it's as big a deal as we think it is, but I hope I'm wrong. So basically, tonight we're going to examine this claim. And it's spread rapidly across social media. It is. People are just sending this everywhere. And it's also being sent through alternative research circles and prophecy communities and countless of video platforms. And the claim is very simple, but its implications are enormous. Now, according to some researchers, the Department of Energy's Genesis mission is not merely a scientific initiative. It is supposedly the technological foundation for the beast system. That's what they're saying. A future global infrastructure tied to artificial intelligence, digital identity, neural interfaces, and perhaps even a prophetic event expected by some before the end of 2026. Now, the theory has gained enough momentum that many people now speak about it as if it were already established fact. Now, if you have followed this program for any length of time, you know that we do not automatically trust official narratives. Governments have lied. Corporations have lied. Institutions have hidden information. We know this. And history is full of examples where skepticism proved justified. But there is another danger that receives far less attention. Sometimes researchers become so skeptical of official narratives that they stop applying the same scrutiny to alternative ones. A claim appears in a video. Someone says that they have connected the dots. A date gets attached to a theory. And before long, people are repeating conclusions they have never personally investigated. Well, that's my job. I investigate this for you. And that's where this story began for me. Listeners started sending me videos, screenshots, reports, and interviews, and they pointed to the Genesis mission. And they pointed to artificial intelligence, and they pointed to brain-computer interfaces, and they pointed to digital identity systems, and they pointed to the expansion of data centers all across the country. Then they pointed to December 2026 and asked a simple question: is this what prophecy looks like in the modern world? Well, is the infrastructure of the beast system being built before our eyes? Well, it is. It is. It's part of it, but it's not time yet. And those are serious questions, and I take them seriously. And they do deserve serious investigation. That's what I did. But they do not deserve ridicule, and they also do not deserve blind acceptance either. The only responsible response is to follow the evidence wherever it leads. And that's exactly what we did. Now, over the past several weeks, we reviewed Genesis mission presentations, grant agreements, executive orders, AI infrastructure reports, scientific papers, and independent analysis. I did that. I investigated claims surrounding the Vanishing Protocol, which people are saying that is the Rapture, and they're preparing for the Rapture. And that's why everyone's building bunkers, because Jesus is coming and the beast system's here. I also examined discussions about cognitive liberty, brain-computer interfaces, digital personhood, and AI sovereignty. I looked for the documents behind the claims, and then I looked for contracts. Then I looked for funding announcements. This is what you have to do. And then I looked for primary sources, and then for evidence that could be independently verified. Now, obviously, the government is going to say, they're not going to say rapture. They're not going to use those words. But they have been caught preparing for things like that. And what I discovered was both more concerning and less sensational than many people expect. On one hand, the documents absolutely reveal an unprecedented effort to integrate artificial intelligence, supercomputing, national laboratories, scientific research, and national security infrastructure. No doubt. The phrase American Science and Security Platform is not a conspiracy theory. It appears directly in official materials. The centralization of computing power is real, and the expansion of AI infrastructure is real, and the race for technological dominance is real. So brain-computer interface research is real, so these developments are not hidden from the public. They're being discussed openly right now, and you can find that information. Yet something interesting happened as I followed the trail even deeper. The more dramatic claims became increasingly difficult to verify. Doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means I couldn't verify. Documents that were easy to locate regarding AI infrastructure suddenly became hard to find when discussions turned toward secret activation dates. Now, evidence becomes thinner when the conversation shifted toward hidden neural networks. References become vague when discussing the Vanishing Protocol. Sources that should have been easy to identify often led back to interpretations rather than original documents. Again and again, we encountered the same problem. The trail that began with contracts and reports eventually ended with stories and assumptions. Now, that does not automatically mean every concern is false. Sometimes a researcher identifies a genuine pattern before the evidence becomes obvious to everyone else. I have spent years training my AI to not just accept everything that's being written, especially just blogs where there are no sources, just this is what the Lord told me, or trust me, bro. Well, history contains many examples of that. But there's a difference between identifying a pattern and proving a conclusion. Yes, I know that the satanic cabal is real. I just can't prove where they hide out. Airplane crud. I'm sure you've gotten it. But there's a difference between identifying patterns and conclusions, right? There's a difference between saying that this could lead somewhere and then saying, we know exactly where it's going. Well, wisdom, folks, which is Proverbs' main theme, wisdom, requires us to recognize the distinction. Otherwise, we're not being good Christians. We're just forwarding information that doesn't have enough evidence to back it up. And one of the lessons I've learned during decades of research is that truth does leave footprints. It really does, no matter how hard Satan tries. And real events leave documents. They do. And real programs leave contracts. Real projects leave budgets, presentations, patents, and records. And the larger the project, the harder it becomes to hide every trace. Now, that does not mean every detail is public, but it does mean there is usually an evidence trail that independent researchers can follow. And when a theory reaches a point where every supporting document disappears and the audience is asked to trust the researcher instead, well, caution should be necessary. What's wrong with that? What I know that we feel like we want it to be true, but feelings just don't trump facts. And this is particularly important for Christians. Scripture repeatedly commands believers to test things, examine things, and prove things. Believe me, if I could prove it, I would be the whistleblower of the era. And we are warned against deception, but we're also warned against false witness, right? The responsibility is not merely to reject lies. The responsibility is to love truth enough to investigate carefully. Because fear can be just as blinding as ignorance, don't you think? Excitement can be just as dangerous as complacency. And everyone's excited now because we're in our dopamine hit. Oh, end of the world. Jesus is coming. Well, both can cause people to see what they expect to see rather than what is actually there. Well, tonight, we're not here to mock prophecy or the people who have been spreading this information. We're not here to mock concern about technology either, as I've written many books about it. The beast system is going to be used through CPUs and artificial intelligence, no doubt. But I don't think we're there yet. And we're also here to ask a simple question. Have we correctly understood the Genesis mission? Well, we will tonight. Or have we projected our fears, expectations, and assumptions onto documents that never actually make the claims being attributed to them? Now, I know they operate in secret, so how can they? They're lying to you, James. Fine. But I have really gotten good at investigative work and finding little breadcrumbs that can give me more details. And at times, it's just not there, folks. So the answer matters because we're living through a time when artificial intelligence, data infrastructure, and technological power are reshaping the world. We need discernment now more than ever, folks. And if there are genuine dangers ahead, we need to identify them clearly. If there are genuine prophetic implications, we need to understand them accurately. But if theories are being built on assumptions rather than evidence, we need the courage to admit that as well. So tonight we begin where every investigation should begin, not with personalities, not with influencers, not with rumors, and not with viral videos. We begin with the documents. I found them. And we follow the evidence, and we separate facts from interpretations, and we distinguish what we know from what we suspect, and what we suspect from that we merely fear. Because in an age where information travels faster than truth, the most valuable skill may not be predicting the future. It may be learning how to recognize the difference between a document and a story. So let's follow the trail and see where it leads. Looking forward to tonight. It's going to be a great show. Shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. Number one warrior is Philip. Philip says, good evening, James, and waves a hand. Hello, Philip. Thank you for being here. Number two warrior is Scorpion saying, hey, y'all, sorry I'm late, working hard. No problem, Scorpion. Thank you for showing up. We appreciate you being here. And also, everyone, please pray for Boots' wife, William Hafner, his wife. Just got out of ICU, and they're putting in a stomach tube. And because she keeps having trouble swallowing. So she's going to have to retrain and go through that. But I do believe she's going to make a full recovery, but still pray for her. Thank you guys for being here. It is an honor. God bless you. Let's get into breaking news.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
Well, Iran's latest, Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a Lebanon truce, apparently. Well, okay. I do know that Trump has been sideswiping or ignoring Bibi Netanyahu and his wants and needs. I think that's a good thing because Israel is the most dangerous country on this planet. Yeah, surprising because I'm a Christian pastor. I know, but we're not supposed to support Israel. We're supposed to support your neighbor and love your neighbor. That's the ultimate thing that Jesus told us to do. He said, this commandment is above all. Love God with all your mind, heart, body, soul, and spirit, and love your neighbor the same. Can you do that? Well, Israel is a neighbor. We need to love them, but we don't need to support their policies of genocide. And this is something I agree with a lot of the Hollywood people who are trying to fight against the Israel lobbyists. Israel is why America doesn't gain independence from debt. Israel has had their grips through blackmail on America for so many years. And yeah, you can go to the source. Oh, it's because of the Rothschilds. Oh, it's because of this and that, or religion or whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters is it's true. And we shouldn't be supporting Israel. We should pray for the people and love the people. But as far as their policies, we don't need to pray for their policies. We can pray that they accept God and quit destroying children and women and elderly and ripping Gaza apart. We can pray for those Hollywood people who are supporting Gaza's new vacation spot. Pray for them that they get a heart, because all of these vacation homes in Gaza are going to be sitting on top of blood from the innocent. I believe it is. And I am 100% against Israel. I'm not against the Israelite religion. I'm not against the Israelite people, but I'm against Israel and their policies because they're acting just like, well, Germany, World War II. Just Gestapo it up. Kill, 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 destroy, destroy, destroy. And I think Bibi needs to go. And that's another thing you could pray for, is pray that Bibi gets nixed, gone. Because Bibi's getting in the way of everyone making money, believe it or not. This is why they're a thorn in the side of all nations. All nations, they just want to start making money. They don't want war, but Israel wants war because they want to expand, because their leadership are Satan worshipers. That's what it is. So Witkoff is heading to Switzerland for Iran talks, according to officials. Who gives a shit? Italy's Meloni, once Trump's closest ally in Europe, says he made up a story about what? About Meloni? I don't know, about her. Says he made up a story about her. So Italy's Meloni says Trump made up a story about her. Who gives a shit? Stop killing people. Barack and Michelle Obama's surprise first visitors to newly opened presidential center. Ooh, who cares? Trump visits new Air Force One, a luxury gift from Qatar that will soon fly him. Well, that's not a good idea, Mr. President. Air Force One, a gift from Saudi Arabia area, Qatar. Did they gift you the plane and not all of the electronics, or did they gift you the electronics? Because to me, it just really sounds like it's going to be a spy mobile for Qatar. Don't use it, Trump. New images show murder weapon and fatal injury in Texas high school track meet. Okay. Apparently, Carmelo Anthony runs away after murdering Austin Metcalf in a surveillance video. Well, what does the Bible say about murder? Don't do it. I'm sorry. But, the more we keep teaching our children that that it's okay to kill people, the more they're going to do it. And I think that's a psychological problem, not a problem with guns. All right, when we come back, we're going to be finishing up our show on December 2026. Is Genesis mission preparing for the rapture, or have we actually misread the documents? I don't know.
It's complicated. The future of America looks like what? Prepare to be amazed.
Whoa. We pay our federal income tax.
What?
LiveTaxFree.net. LiveTaxFree.net. LiveTaxFree.net /10 a.m.
That's our new video. They're fun. But it's a good jingle. Hopefully you can remember that and, start your own unincorporated, just like all the banks do. Yeah, there you have it. All right, guys. So December 2026, is Genesis mission preparing for the rapture? Or have we been misreading the documentation? Well, the evidence should be there. So there you have it. And I went and I did my research. Now, every generation has its own fears, its own signs, and its own interpretation of where history is headed. In previous centuries, people looked at empires, wars, plagues, and economic collapses and wondered whether they were witnessing the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And in our time, the focus has shifted toward technology, especially artificial intelligence, digital identity systems, surveillance networks, data centers, and neural interfaces. Well, they've all become the new symbols through which many people interpret the future. And it is within that environment that Genesis mission theory emerged. Now, the theory spread quickly because it combined several subjects that already concerned large numbers of people. The theory works on your heart, not on data, not on facts. And artificial intelligence was advancing, and it still is, faster than almost anyone expected. And governments were investing billions into computing infrastructure, and corporations were constructing massive data centers across the country. Brain-computer interface technology was moving from science fiction into reality. But if you do some research, Elon is still having trouble connecting it. And at the same time, many Christians were studying biblical prophecy and asking whether modern technology could provide the mechanisms described in passages concerning buying and selling, surveillance, deception, and centralized authority. Now, when these separate conversations merged, well, Genesis mission became a focal point. Now, for many researchers, the phrase that immediately stood out was the government's repeated use of the term American Science and Security Platform. Well, to some ears, that sounded like much more than a research initiative. It sounded like the construction of a national infrastructure layer that could eventually connect scientific research, artificial intelligence, national security, energy systems, and data management all into a single ecosystem. Could. And once that interpretation took hold, every new document and every new announcement was viewed through that lens. Well, discernment means to have wisdom. Wisdom means to take a step back and go, hold on. What are we in a rush for? Okay, what's the rush? We need to do our research, right? Well, social media accelerated the process. Go figure. And videos appeared claiming that Genesis mission was secretly preparing for a major event. Well, if you live in fear, you will automatically just go there. Yep, Jesus is coming. They're all going underground. Fall on us, rocks, to hide us from the King of Kings. Well, some researchers suggest the platform represented the foundation of a future beast system, while others argued that infrastructure would support digital identity systems, economic controls, or advanced surveillance mechanisms. Well, as these claims spread, a date began appearing repeatedly: December 26, December 2026. And for many viewers, that date transformed an abstract concern into something immediate. Well, suddenly the conversation was no longer about long-term technological trends. It was about a countdown. Here we go again. And I've done many shows about setting dates and how that's not godly. You see, Satan sets dates. God looks for the heart. And what made the theory particularly persuasive was that it was built around real things. The Department of Energy had, in fact, announced the Genesis mission. Artificial intelligence was indeed becoming deeply integrated into scientific research. Yeah. Data centers were expanding at an unprecedented pace. Yes. Brain-computer interface research was advancing rapidly. Yes. And the public could verify each of those facts. But the challenge was determining where the documented evidence ended and where interpretation began. Because when a theory is built on genuine facts, it often becomes difficult to identify which parts are proven and which parts are just assumed. Well, the more that I examined the discussion, the more I noticed that different researchers were actually talking about different things while using the same language. And some focused on artificial intelligence, others focused on neural interfaces, some focused on digital currency, while others on biblical prophecy. But they're not all the same thing. And yet these separate discussions gradually merge into a single narrative. A listener could watch a video about data centers, and another about brain-computer interfaces, and a third about Revelation, and the same coordinated project, even when no direct evidence connected them, and then they freak out. Well, it's my job is to help you not freak out and present the evidence and say, calm down, honey bunny, everything's going to be okay. And this is where the role of a researcher becomes very important. The goal is not to attack a theory, but because it actually sounds extraordinary. History has repeatedly shown that extraordinary events do occur. The goal is also not to embrace a theory because it confirms our fears or even expectations. The goal is to separate facts, interpretations, and conclusions. Because facts tells us what exists. Interpretations suggest what it might mean. And conclusions claim to know where it's going, and problems arise when people begin treating interpretations as established facts and conclusions as proven outcomes. Well, one of the reasons this particular theory gained so much attention is that it touched on legitimate concerns and tugged on your heart. Many people are very uneasy about the concentration of technological power. I am too. And they're concerned about artificial intelligence replacing human judgment. It's coming. But are we there now? Not yet. And they worry about increasing surveillance, digital dependency, and the erosion of privacy. Well, look at all of the countries that have refused the digital currency. It's not happening right now. There's no world order. It's been split up between the East and the West. It's pretty obvious. Even though the East now lives above America, that's Canada. They're Eastern. Those concerns are not irrational. In fact, many are openly discussed by the academics through policymakers and technology leaders themselves. Yeah, they're talking about it too. Even Peter Thiel did a little thing, last year, flying around with his little airplane to warn people about the Antichrist. Well, theories built around those concerns gain credibility even when some of their supporting claims remain unverified. So let's calm down. Now, as we begin our investigation, we made a simple commitment here. We would neither defend nor attack the Genesis mission theory until I had examined the evidence myself. I would also follow every document that I could find and review the official presentations. I would examine the agreements and reports and investigate the claims surrounding the Vanishing Protocol that we're hearing, which they claim is the Rapture, and related narratives. And most importantly, I hold every source to the same standard, regardless of whether it came from a government agency, a technology company, a social media researcher, or a prophecy teacher. Well, that commitment led me to an important realization almost immediately that the strongest part of the theory was not that there were sensational claims. The strongest part was the documented reality beneath them. The challenge was determining whether the evidence actually supported the dramatic conclusions being promoted online. And we were looking at the early stages of a prophetic infrastructure, are we? Were we witnessing the normal evolution of advanced technology, or were multiple independent developments being combined into a story that extended far beyond what the documents are actually said? I believe the latter. And those questions would guide the rest of my investigation. And before I can answer questions, I need to begin where every serious investigation should begin. To set aside the rumors, the headlines, and the viral videos for just a moment and examine the Genesis mission itself. What is it? What does the government say it's building? What objectives are stated in the official documents? And how much of the online narratives can actually be traced back to those records? What's so wrong with doing research? Well, that's where the evidence actually truly begins, and it's a trail. And before we can decide whether Genesis mission is connected to prophecy, the beast system, or a future event in 2026 in December, we must first answer a much simpler question. What is Genesis mission according to the people who created it? Too often, researchers begin with conclusions and then search for evidence that supports them. I've had to stop myself from doing that because there's no wisdom in it. A better approach is to begin with the documents themselves and then allow the evidence to define the scope of the discussion. And the Genesis mission was announced by the Department of Energy as an initiative focused on transforming science and engineering through artificial intelligence. Well, the official language is ambitious. Rather than describing a single research project, the mission presents itself as a platform designed to integrate multiple technological capabilities into a unified framework. And throughout the presentations and agreements, references appear repeatedly to artificial intelligence, supercomputing, advanced scientific instruments, national laboratories, secure data systems, and future computing architecture. Well, the government's stated objective is not merely to improve existing research. It is to fundamentally change how scientific discovery is conducted, meaning they're going to take a bunch of all of its research that it's done, it's going to put it into AI and say, go higher than what we learned. That's really what this initiative's all about. They want to learn more about everything that we've already learned about and take it to the next level because artificial intelligence can think faster than us. And one phrase appears throughout the material that deserves attention. Officials describe their goal as building an American science and security platform. We're all going to die. Well, that language immediately attracted the attention of many researchers because it combines two concepts that were traditionally separated. Science and security are not being described as independent domains. Instead, they're being presented as components of a larger integrated system. And the documents repeatedly discuss bringing together research institutions, computing resources, data infrastructure, and artificial intelligence under a common framework capable of accelerating discovery and maintaining technological leadership. Basically, merging everything from the universities, here, there, and over there, merge them all together into each subject, into each category, and have the artificial intelligence start thinking and start giving us new technology, new information, stuff that we haven't been able to calculate before. Well, to understand why this matters, imagine scientific research 50 years ago. Individual laboratories conducted experiments, universities maintained their own resources, government agencies funded projects, but often operated within separate domains. In fact, in non-government agencies or organizations, NGOs, and hit it as black projects. Well, this is putting it all together. This is basically bypassing the deep state. And the Genesis mission envisions something very different. Scientific instruments, supercomputers, artificial intelligence systems, laboratories, and data repositories become interconnected through a shared architecture, which is something we haven't done before. And researchers are no longer simply performing experiments, they're interacting with a technological ecosystem designed to automate portions of the discovery process itself. Now, this is where artificial intelligence becomes central to the mission. And they can't do this without all these data centers. And yes, they're going to put our information in there too. Yes, they're going to use that eventually to sell us crap that we don't need. Yes. But it's not all happening to where one day you're going to wake up and then Trump's going to announce, we're all hooking up to the internet in our brains and you're going to love it. It's not going to happen that way. You're going to want to hook up to the beast system. You're going to know what it is. That's what the Bible says. You're going to know the difference. The Holy Spirit will not let you be part of it. Now, the documents do not describe AI as a simple tool for answering questions or generating text. Instead, the documents describe AI agents capable of assisting researchers, analyzing enormous data sets, identifying patterns, generating hypotheses, and accelerating experimentation. And this is the race against China. We need it because China continues to come up with newer things than we have, like the proton chip instead of the electricity chip. Well, the goal is to create systems that actively participate in the scientific process. Not the goal is when Jesus comes, you're all going to hook up to Genesis machine. I don't know how they're putting this stuff together. Well, that represents a significant shift in how knowledge may be produced in the future. This is a good thing. It's not going to be used as good in the future because that's how it always works out. But many people hear descriptions like this and they immediately think of science fiction. Yet the reality is often far more practical than dramatic. Because researchers today face challenges involving enormous quantities of information, and scientific data sets have become so large that human beings alone cannot efficiently process them. Now, artificial intelligence offers a way to search, analyze, model, and interpret data at scales previously impossible. And from the perspective of government planners, integrated AI into scientific discovery is viewed as a strategic necessity rather than a futuristic history. Another important theme found throughout all the documents and the material is competition. The documents repeatedly reference technological leadership, national security, economic competitiveness, and strategic advantage. It's against China. Russia is not on the playing field of technology as China is. The reason they are is because we had to build all of our shit. The documents repeatedly reference technological leadership, national security, economic competitiveness, and strategic advantage. It's not surprising when viewed within the context of global competition. And nations all around the world are investing heavily in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced manufacturing, and scientific infrastructure. So the Genesis mission reflects a belief that leadership in these fields will shape economic and geopolitical power for decades to come. They're investing into our future. And, that's what they say on the top. But, it's going to be used to control us. But it's not, nowhere near is this about the rapture. Whether one agrees with that assessment or not, it helps explain the urgency presented throughout the initiative here. And at this point, the investigation, it's important to recognize that the documents do what they say and what they don't say. The documents clearly describe artificial intelligence. They clearly describe integration. They clearly describe scientific infrastructure. They clearly describe national security considerations, meaning when you put all that stuff into one place, one cloud, many data centers all computing under one, that security is needed because China could hack that. So security needs to be put into there. And they clearly describe that. And what they do not describe are beast systems, neural grids, rapture preparations, or secret activation events. No, we're not there yet. And those concepts appear in later interpretations of the material rather than in the official language itself. So that distinction is critical because it establishes the difference between evidence and interference. And honestly, they're not attempting to hide their ambition either. Officials openly compare the initiative to previous national mobilization efforts that transformed entire industries and reshaped the future. And as our investigation continued, I discovered that many of the most dramatic claims circulating online were not actually rooted in the core Genesis mission document at all. Instead, they often emerged from interpretations attached to specific dates, technological developments, or broader prophetic frameworks. I know, you're all freaking out about Sabrina Wallace. They're hacking us. They're going to control our mind. By December 26th, they're going to turn it on, and they're testing our frequency. We have got to stop thinking we're that far ahead, and then they're just going to turn it on, and everyone... It's not going to happen. Look, 3 years ago, before I really started becoming an actual researcher and investigator and a theologian, which I have become, dude, I would have believed in all this bullshit. I admit it. But as I kept asking God for more wisdom, he kept grounding me. And I need to help ground you guys. Stop living in fear. So all of these things, the Genesis mission itself, it doesn't describe December 2026 activation event. Well, where did that date come from? Why has it become so central to the discussion? And what do the documents actually say about it? Well, I found out. Because those questions led me directly to the most widely cited piece of evidence in the entire theory, December 2026. And that appears more than any other in discussions about the Genesis mission. It's a date, December 2026. And for many people, that date transformed an ordinary government initiative into something prophetic. Videos began appearing online suggesting December marked an activation point, a deployment phase, a transition event, or a beginning of a new technological era. It's not. Some researchers linked it to the beast system. It's part of the beginning of it as it grows, but God hasn't allowed Satan to give it breath, because that's what the Bible says. So that hasn't happened yet. Artificial intelligence, when it becomes sentient, is the fake breath that Satan is going to use against God, saying, "Hey, I can create," and God just allowed it to happen. And that's where everyone's going to fall for the beast, because it's going to be a god. Others connected it to artificial intelligence, and even a few suggested it represented a milestone related to the rapture itself. Where? Well, the date became central to the narrative that many people stopped asking a simple question. What does the date actually refer to in the documents? And it's not hard to go look at it. Well, when I traced the origin of the claim, I discovered something surprisingly ordinary. December 2026 date appears in Genesis mission materials as part of the funding and application timeline associated with the program. Oh my God. And specifically, it's connected to the submission deadline for a certain phase, number 2, applications resulting from earlier awards. So in other words, the date is part of a grant administration process where they get more money, and they have to meet that deadline. And that deadline's within a government funding structure. So that may not be exciting, but it's what the document actually says. Well, now at first glance, it seems to like the end of the story, but if the date is merely a grant deadline, then surely the theory collapses. Yet that would be an oversimplification, don't you think? The reason the theory gained traction is that people observed something beyond the date itself. They looked at the scale of the initiative and integration of artificial intelligence, the national security language, and the rapid expansion of infrastructure, and freaked. Then they saw a specific date attached to the project and began asking whether that date represented more than a bureaucratic milestone. And then they probably said they prayed, and God told them, yes, it's true. God doesn't talk to us every single time we pray. We have to discern what we hear and test the spirit. So the concern was about what the deadline actually symbolized. And this reveals an important lesson about modern research. Dates often become containers for expectations. Once a person believes a major transformation is underway, every milestone begins to look significant. Administration deadlines become prophetic markers. Budget cycles become countdown clocks. Program phases become signs of imminent change. World War III was supposed to start when Trump invaded Iran, and now it seems to be dying out. Right? Remember, the media told us. Now, the danger is not asking questions about these dates. The danger is assuming their meaning before the evidence supports the conclusion. And social media doesn't do a really good job of stopping misinformation and disinformation. Even though they shut down people like me, it still sucks at it. Now, history provides many examples of this phenomenon, guys. Throughout the 20th century, countless of dates were attached to predictions about economic collapse, political transformation, technological revolution, and prophetic fulfillment. Heck, when I was young, we all thought that Jesus was coming in the 80s, then in the 90s, then in the oohs and the teens, and then it goes on and on and on. Some were connected to financial systems, others were tied to leaders or institutions. But in nearly every case, the date itself carried far more meaning in the minds of observers than it did in the original documents. What's interesting is Congress is still passing laws that fuck you over, and nobody is using AI to research the laws and write to their representative. They just go, just trust them. I mean, we've got the tools now to be lawyers and to read it and read every single law that's being passed in every city, state, county, and federal institution, and yet no one's saying, hey, I think you as an American should research this information and say what it says. We can do that. So expectations grew around those documents and around the data until the date became more important than the evidence that actually produced it. So at this point, some listeners may be thinking that the entire theory has been disproven. Others may be thinking that the official explanation is simply a cover story. Well, I wouldn't leave past DARPA to put crap out like this to freak us all out because they feed off of our fear. But both responses actually miss the deeper issue. The real question is not whether December 2026 is a grant deadline. It clearly is. The real question is whether the larger trends surrounding the Genesis mission deserve attention regardless of the date. And if the concerns are valid, they should remain valid even if the date disappears entirely, right? Well, a strong argument does not depend on a single administrative milestone. It depends on evidence that can stand on its own. And as we continued this investigation, the realization changed my focus. Instead of asking whether December was secretly significant, I began asking what the documents themselves revealed about the future being built all around us. You know, what exactly is the American science and security platform? Why is artificial intelligence being integrated so deeply into scientific discovery? Why are government agencies speaking about unified systems, AI agents, and national technological leadership? Well, those questions led towards something far more interesting than a deadline on a grant application. It led me towards a larger story hidden in plain sight within the documents themselves. So here's the real story. Now, by the time of this investigation, something unexpected happened. The further that I moved away from the sensational claims and the viral videos, the more interested and interesting the actual documents became to me. The biggest surprise was not finding evidence of a secret activation date. It was discovering that the official material already described a transformation significant enough to deserve attention on its own. The documents revealed a vision of the future centered on integration, centralization, automation, and artificial intelligence. Well, whether one views that future as progress or a warning depends largely on their worldview. But the direction itself is difficult to ignore. One word appears repeatedly throughout the Genesis mission material: integration. Well, scientific instruments are being integrated with artificial intelligence. Data systems are being integrated with research platforms. Laboratories are being integrated with national computing resources. None of this has been done yet. And it's all going into one place. And AI agents are being integrated into scientific workflows. Well, what emerges is not collection of separate projects, but a unified ecosystem, an agreement in America by all leaders. And the objective is to reduce barriers between systems so information, computation, experimentation, and analysis can flow together more efficiently. Now, from a scientific perspective, it promises enormous gains in speed and capability. We'll progress faster. We'll learn how to make money, even though we're going to be losing jobs because of AI. And from a societal perspective, it raises very important questions about concentration and control. And this is where many researchers begin thinking about the Tower of Babel, me especially. The comparison is not perfect, but it's understandable. In the biblical account, humanity sought unity through a common language and a common purpose. Now you're getting it. The issue was not communication itself, folks. The issue was what humanity intended to do with that unified capability. Now, today, technology is creating a different form of common language. Data becomes standardized, systems integrated. Artificial intelligence will serve as a translator between vast pools of information. Well, the result is a level of coordination that previous generations could scarcely imagine. I think it could be even farther advanced than even the Tower of Babel itself. The Genesis mission documents openly describe creating a platform capable of connecting some of the most advanced scientific resources in the world. What could this be? Secret black projects that were patented and locked away, now put into this? Well, research that once required years may eventually require months. And experiments that once demanded large teams may increasingly rely on AI assistance. So scientific discoveries that once occurred independently may now become part of a shared computational environment. So supporters view this as the next great leap in human knowledge. Critics, however, worry that concentrating so much capability within interconnected systems creates new forms of dependence. Both perspectives deserve serious consideration. And one of the most striking aspects of the documents is their emphasis on artificial intelligence agents. Most people think of AI as a chatbot answering questions or generating text. Not so. The vision described in Genesis Mission is much broader. AI agents are presented as tools capable of assisting researchers analyzing massive data sets and generating hypotheses, identifying patterns, and accelerating scientific discovery. Well, in other words, the role of AI is shifting from a passive tool to an active participant in the United States, call it discovery. It thinks faster than us. And so what we've learned up until now, we're going to ask it to take us to the next level. That's what this is about. They call it Genesis because they think it's the beginning of unifying technology and mankind. Now, this is the next step towards the beast system. But is it these data centers and Project Genesis and all of this, is it the beast system? Not yet. So the implications of that shift are profound because it changes the relationship between human beings and the systems that they create. So for centuries, technology extended human capability, and a telescope extended sight, right? Microscope extended our perception, and a computer extended calculation. Well, artificial intelligence introduces something completely different. It extends analysis itself. Systems are increasingly able to identify relationships and patterns that human beings might overlook. So this creates tremendous opportunities, but it also introduces new dependencies. And the more society relies on artificial intelligence to interpret reality, the more important it becomes to understand who controls the systems, who trains the models, and who or what assumptions are embedded within them. That's the problem. And this concern becomes even more significant when viewed through the lens of national security. The Genesis mission is not described simply as a scientific platform. It's repeatedly connected to strategic interests, technological leadership, and competitive advantage. The phrase American Science and Security Platform, well, it appears for a reason because it's going to be very valuable. The initiative is intended to strengthen scientific capability while also enhancing national competitiveness. From the government's perspective, these goals are inseparable. Scientific leadership supports economic strength supports national security, and national security protects technological leadership. So each component reinforces the other. Now consider this from the biblical perspective. Many prophecy-minded observers are not alarmed because computers exist. They are concerned because power tends to concentrate. It does. History repeatedly demonstrates that systems created for efficiency often become systems of dependency. Banking becomes centralized. Communication, same. Commerce, same. Centralized. Controlled by a select few. Information becomes centralized. Well, the concern is not that every individual involved has malicious intentions. Not all of them do. So the concern is that centralized systems create opportunities for influence and control that decentralized systems do not. Now, whether those opportunities are eventually abused is another question entirely. We will find out here in the future, and maybe in 10 years I'll have a show all about the abuse of Genesis. But this is why I believe that many researchers are looking in the wrong place. They're searching for hidden documents that reveal a secret plan when the more important story is already visible. The Genesis mission does not need a hidden agenda to raise meaningful questions. The official documents already describe the construction of an increasingly integrated technological ecosystem. They already discuss artificial intelligence, centralized computing resources, national infrastructure, and strategic coordination. Well, those developments are real, documented, and openly discussed. We do not need speculation to recognize their significance and the power that this is going to have. But the irony is that some of the strongest concerns become weaker when exaggerated. Because if someone claims the Genesis mission is secretly preparing for a specific prophetic event in 2026, well, the evidence quickly becomes difficult to verify. I'm sorry, there's no evidence there. And I know people say, God said no one knows the month or the hour, but we know the year. Whatever. We're not to worry about times and dates and all of that stuff. That's fear-mongering. I used to do that because I used to think that Jesus was coming and I was going to prophesy his entrance. Well, that wasn't what happened. You know, with age comes wisdom. You start to go, oh, I was wrong again. Maybe I need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what kind of message do I want to give out? Well, I'm just simply offering you the truth that I see through books, internet, blogs, YouTubes, TikToks, social media, everything that I could find and gather that's online. And then compare it against all the books that I currently have, which are 50,000 and growing. So as my investigation continued, another subject repeatedly emerged alongside the discussions of Genesis. Researchers kept pointing toward brain-computer interfaces, neural decoding, connectonomics, no joke, connectonomics, and the possibility of direct interaction between minds and machines. Well, I found a lot of books on that. And some claim these technologies were already being developed on a massive scale. They're not. You don't know anybody who's connected to the internet in their brain right now. Nobody does. Because iron will have problems mixing with clay. That was prophesied. Well, to understand whether these claims had merit, we need to leave the world of AI infrastructure and examine a very different frontier, the rapidly developing field of brain-computer interfaces. That's where the next stage of my investigation began. So the first thing we must recognize is that brain-computer interfaces are real. Elon has a few successful candidates that actually works and they can control their computers with their mind. And as with Genesis mission itself, well, let me take a step back. For others, they're simply medical tools designed to restore. Hold on. We got to recognize that the brain-computer interfaces are real. Okay, we did that. There's no longer theoretical field existing, only in laboratories. And billions of dollars are being put into it. They're pushing it hard, but it's not here yet. Companies such as Neuralink and Synchron have demonstrated systems capable of allowing individuals with severe disabilities to communicate and interact with computers using neural signals. Well, researchers have successfully enabled patients to move cursors, select letters, operate digital devices, and transmit basic commands through thought alone. Now, these achievements are remarkable because they offer hope to individuals who previously had very limited means of communication. But can they surf the net in their head and download data? No, we're not there yet. We can't download data and put it into our heads like Neo did when you learn how to fight. That stuff isn't here. And at the same time, the field extends far beyond a few high-profile companies. Government agencies, universities, medical institutions, and private corporations have invested heavily in neuroscience, neurodecoding, connectonomics, and brain-machine interface research, while programs associated with organizations such as DARPA, whom I don't like, have explored non-invasive neural communication, advanced prosthetics, and methods for improving the interaction between humans and machines. Well, the goal is, well, in many cases, is very practical. Scientists hope to restore lost function, improve rehabilitation, and better understand how the brain processes information. But it's more of a medical thing right now than it is a novelty. And this is where discussions often become very confusing because many people hear about brain-computer interfaces and immediately imagine a future where every thought can be monitored. Well, it will be, but we're not there yet, folks. I remember a lot of people like years ago were saying that your phone is reading your mind. It's not. It can read your facial recognition, your facial movements, and pick up on things, but it can't read your mind. The reality is far more limited, folks. It really is. Let's calm down. And all of this hype about all this stuff is on purpose to sell companies or for companies to get investors. Current systems are capable of directing specific neural patterns under controlled conditions, but they're not reading minds in the way that popular culture often suggests. Translating neural activity into meaningful information remains extraordinarily difficult. The brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons interacting through processes that scientists still not fully understand. And even the most advanced systems today operate within significant limitations. Even though all of you have heard of these elite people uploading their brain or their soul into a machine. We're not there yet, folks. Now, if it's in some black budget operation underground, it's not anywhere near where we can prove. Yet dismissing the technology would equally be foolish. The progress achieved over the past decade has been substantial. Researchers are learning how to decode speech-related signals and identify intended movements and map increasingly detailed neural pathways. But we can't create a neural brain just like ours yet. In connectonomics, these projects are attempting to create comprehensive maps of neural structures. And advances in machine learning are helping scientists interpret signals that would have been incomprehensible only just a few years ago. So they're making progress and it's going fast. And they want to go faster. So how do you go faster? You put all that shit into this AI Genesis so they can start building actual robots that are synthetic, but just like us. That's where they want to go. And one of the most interesting discoveries also from my investigation involved the concept of cognitive liberty. As neural technologies advance, legal scholars and ethicists, they've begun asking questions that previous generations never had to consider. Who owns neural data? Does a person have a right to mental privacy? Can thoughts be considered private property? Should governments regulate access to brain-derived information? Well, these discussions may sound futuristic, but they're already taking place right now in academia and throughout policy circles. And the fact that these questions are being asked tells us that serious institutions recognize the potential implications of future neural technologies. That's where we're going. But what struck me the most was during this investigation was that most important issue may not be the technology at all. The deeper issue is understanding human nature. We're impulsive. Every major discussion surrounding BCIs eventually arrives at the same crossroads. Are human beings merely biological machines that can be mapped, decoded, and replicated? Or is there something about consciousness, identity, and the soul that transcends computation? Well, the answer to that question influences how a person interprets new or every new development in neuroscience and artificial intelligence. But real BCI research was easy to verify. Extraordinary claims about population-wide neural networks, hidden control systems, or undocumented deployment programs were much harder to substantiate. But they're working toward it, and they're talking about it, and they know it's going to be the future. And this is why they're all rushing to invest into it. And behind every discussion of artificial intelligence, neurotechnology, and future systems stood a physical reality that receives far less attention than chatbots and algorithms. Massive data centers, enormous power requirements, semiconductor manufacturing, water consumption, electrical infrastructure. Well, in other words, the future was not being built primarily through software. It's definitely being built through the physical infrastructure. And we're wasting a lot of resources. And to understand who controls the future, we first need to understand who controls the machines that make it possible. Well, that's where our investigation turns next. This is AI sovereignty in the infrastructure empire. Now, when most people think about artificial intelligence, they think about software, chatbots, image generators, voice assistants, algorithms. Well, what they rarely think about are the physical foundations that make these systems possible. Now, behind every AI model sits a vast network of infrastructure that consumes electricity, water, land, semiconductors, fiber optics, and enormous amounts of capital. Money. Now, the deeper we investigated Genesis' mission, the more it became clear that the real story may not be artificial intelligence itself. The real story may be who owns the infrastructure that powers it. We talked about this last night. And one of the most revealing findings from recent AI reports is how concentrated this infrastructure has become. The United States hosts thousands of data centers, thousands, like 3,000, I think. No, there's 5,000 and 3,000 being built currently, something like that. Don't quote me. But we're building more than any other nation, faster. And entire regions are being transformed into data industrial zones. Massive facilities are appearing near power plants, fiber routes, and water sources. Well, these structures are often described as cloud infrastructure, but the term can be misleading. The cloud is not floating in a city. It's concrete, steel, transformers, cooling systems, generators, and thousands of acres of physical equipment. And every AI breakthrough rests upon that foundation right now. So the scale of this expansion is difficult to comprehend. Training advanced AI systems requires immense computational resources. And that's where we're going. And those resources demand vast amounts of energy. In fact, within the next 5 years, 10 years, somewhere between 5 and 10 years, AI is going to pull 9% of all energy nationwide. So the result is that AI has become inseparable from energy policy. So this helps explain why agencies involved in energy, national security, and scientific research are increasingly discussing AI within the same conversations, because they're all going to merge together. And they're also talking about how to use AI to build better nuclear power plants and use AI to build free energy. And this is where the concept of AI sovereignty enters the discussion, because around the world, governments are beginning to realize that AI is not merely a software industry, it's strategic capability. And that's why we're rushing into it, because nations that control the infrastructure, well, they gain significant advantages in economics, defense, research, and manufacturing. And as a result, countries are investing heavily in domestic computing resources, semiconductor production, and AI development. Well, the language of sovereignty is revealing because it suggests that governments increasingly view AI as a matter of national independence rather than simply a commercial innovation. So we're on the cusp of that, okay? People say we have an AI bubble. It's not going to pop now. We're just in the beginning of it. I thought it was, but all these data centers being built and what Trump has been saying, well, it all tells a different story. They're investing heavily into it, and the government's involved, and now it's a matter of national security. Now, for Christians and students of history, this pattern should feel familiar. Throughout history, power often accumulates around critical infrastructure. Ancient empires controlled roads, ports, and trade routes. Industrial powers controlled railroads, factories, and energy resources. Financial powers controlled banking systems and credit markets. Well, today, the critical infrastructure increasingly involves data centers, computing resources, semiconductors, and artificial intelligence. Well, the mechanisms change, but the principle remains remarkably consistent. Those who control foundational infrastructure often exercise influence far beyond what is immediately visible. And many listeners may be wondering how these developments relate to biblical prophecy. Well, it's a fair question. And when people read passages describing economic control, centralized authority, or systems that influence buying and selling, it's understandable that they see potential parallels. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to look outside your doorstep. And that's the best place where you can gauge what's happening. Because if you get it from the internet, like you're doing right now, it's not, it's chaos and it's fear and it's fast moving. Yet when you step outside, the only thing that you can notice are people are just looking at their cell phones. Well, that's the beginning. The next stage is when people are hooked to it. Then the shit will hit the fan. But parallels here throughout Scripture doesn't mean it's proof. A technology may resemble something described in prophecy without actually fulfilling it. The challenge is learning how to distinguish between mechanisms that make certain outcomes possible and evidence that those outcomes have already arrived. Artificial intelligence cannot exist at scale without compute. Compute cannot exist at scale without energy. Energy cannot exist without physical infrastructure. So the future is being built right now. AI isn't fully ready. It's just a baby. And whether those systems ultimately serve human flourishing or increased dependency will basically depend largely on how they are governed and who controls them. Well, that's Technocracy 101. I reached a crossroads when I was doing this research. I examined Genesis mission and examined brain-computer interfaces, and I had examined AI infrastructure and sovereignty before, but the question now becomes unavoidable. Why do so many Christians look at these developments and immediately think about the beast system? Well, are these concerns rooted in genuine biblical principles, or are modern technologies simply becoming the latest objects upon which people project prophetic expectations? I think it's the latter. But to answer that question, we must turn away from technology for a moment and examine the scriptural framework that's driving much of this discussion. That's where my investigation heads next. At some point during almost every discussion about artificial intelligence, digital identity, surveillance systems, centralized infrastructure, someone raises the same question. Is this the beast system? Well, for many Christians, the concern feels obvious. They read about digital currencies, biometric identification, AI-powered surveillance, and increasingly interconnected systems, and immediately recognize similarities to passages found in Revelation and the book of Daniel. Well, others argue that these comparisons are exaggerated and reflect a long history of prophetic speculation attached to new technologies. Well, we first have to understand why the question keeps reappearing. The truth is that Christians have been asking similar questions for centuries. We all thought, um, the world thought, we were in the end of days during World War I, then in World War II. They all thought the beast system was coming through Germany. Well, during the Roman Empire, believers saw prophetic significance in imperial authority, and during the Industrial Revolution, some viewed mechanization, as a sign of the end times. Well, in the 20th century, concerns focused on radio, television, computers, barcodes, credit cards, and eventually the internet. Remember, they told you your credit card was a mark of the beast. It was a chip. They told you that the barcode was 666. Well, each technological leap prompted people to ask whether humanity was moving closer to the conditions described in Revelation. Well, most of these specific predictions proved incorrect. Yet the underlying concern never disappeared. And part of the reason is that Revelation describes principles that transcend any particular technology. See, the text speaks of economic control, political authority, deception, allegiance, and pressure placed upon individuals to conform. And it's happened before. It describes systems capable of influencing buying and selling. That's happened before, if you're a preterist. It describes power structures that appear global in reach. And whether one interprets these passages literally, symbolically, or somewhere in between, it's easy to understand why modern technologies trigger comparisons. And for the first time in history, many of the mechanisms that could support such systems actually exist now, today. And this is where caution becomes important, because there's a difference between saying a technology could enable a future system and saying the system already exists. You see, in my books, I talk about the beast system and how it's the ancient technology used buildings as CPUs and rituals inside as the programs, the algorithm. That was a ritual where they would chant certain things, move certain areas. It was just an ancient computer pulling the breath. Well, that's what a CPU is. And data has replaced the breath. A digital identity system could theoretically support extensive monitoring, verification, and economic participation. And that's a factual observation, true, but it does not automatically mean every digital identity initiative is the mark of the beast. Slow down. And the Genesis mission provides a perfect example. The official documents describe integration, artificial intelligence, scientific infrastructure, and national security coordination. Oh my God, we're all going to die. Well, those developments are real, and a Christian might reasonably observe that increasing centralization could create conditions that resemble them or themes found in prophetic passages. Sure. To baby Christians who haven't matured in a relationship with God, the problem arises when someone moves from possibility to certainty. Because once certainty enters the conversation, every document becomes evidence. Every deadline becomes prophetic. And every technological advancement becomes another confirmation of a conclusion that was already reached and advanced. Remember, the Bible says Jesus is going to come like a thief in the night. We're all going to be asleep. And I repeatedly, throughout my research, found that pattern. Researchers would begin genuine concerns about centralization and technology. Then they would connect those concerns into revelation. Well, after that, assumptions gradually became conclusions. Not before long, a grant deadline was transformed into a prophetic countdown, and an AI research initiative became a confirmed step towards a beast system in the rapture. Come on, folks. Well, the claim kept resurfacing despite the lack of documentation, and researchers repeatedly referenced something called the Vanishing Protocol. See if you can go find anything on it. I couldn't. And it was often presented as a hidden framework, a missing piece connecting artificial intelligence, neural interfaces, digital identity, and even explanations for a future rapture event. There's no proof. And the more that I heard about it, the more important it became to investigate it. But if such a concept truly existed, there should be some evidence, one footprint, one fingerprint, one piece of straw or hay or hair. There should be documents. There should be a trail. Yes, there is a trail, and you can read it throughout my books, that technology is going to bring in and usher in the mark of the beast. Yes. But is this program the mark of the beast? No. And when I began researching and searching for the origins of the Vanishing Protocol, well, what I found was a very revealing part of this investigation. Now, the phrase repeatedly appeared in discussions surrounding Genesis mission, artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces, and future technological systems. And depending on the researcher, the Vanishing Protocol meant different things. Some described it as a hidden framework designed to explain away a future rapture event. Others connected it to digital identity systems, continuity architectures, neural mapping, or transhumanist projects. Well, if all that crap happened in December and they turned it on, don't you think people are going to just say enough? You got to remember that the people still have power over the institutions if they just exert their power. Now, others connected it to digital identity systems and freaked out through continuity architectures, neural mapping, and transhumanist projects, but still others spoke about it as if it were established government program operating behind the scenes. Well, it could very well be. But the common theme was always the same. The Vanishing Protocol was presented as a missing piece that explained how multiple technologies would eventually converge. I didn't find anything about this thing. Not one prophecy person who talks about it. Just some lady who referenced another lady and saying fact. Well, when I went to that lady and then the other lady and looked for their information and looked for their sources, looked for where they got this information, nothing. If you're going to put information out and back it up, have proof, even if you have to quote the Bible. But the problem emerged when I began looking for the source. I searched for official documents, for grant agreements. I searched for patents, contracts, research papers, government announcements, and institutional references. I searched for the earliest appearance of the phrase and searched for connections to the Genesis mission, then for references within discussions of brain-computer interfaces and cognitive liberty. And again and again and again, I encountered the same obstacle. The phrase itself was easy to find, but the origin was not. Now, this is one of the most important lessons a researcher can learn, folks. A claim is not evidence. A repeated claim is still not evidence. Thousands of people repeating the same statement does not transform the statement into a documented fact. The question is always the same. Where did the information come from? And when asking people who put out this information, sometimes they have problems pointing to their sources. And you can't just say, God told me. How can we trust this person? How do we know that they're not the enemy? We don't. But why would we jump into something without any verification? Well, the Bible says to test the spirit. Test the spirit of the article. Test the spirit of the person and the information that they're releasing. You see, if you're going to be talking about the end times, you better be talking about how to get out of it through choosing Jesus Christ. The Vanishing Protocol did not behave in the way that I thought it would. The closer that I got to the center of that claim, the less documentation appeared, period. And instead of moving from speculation towards evidence, the trail often moved from evidence towards speculation. Thus, it's a conspiracy theory. And nobody's talking about it, which leads me to go, maybe this is paid opposition. But I did find myself facing an uncomfortable reality going through this information. The strongest evidence existed where the claims were the least dramatic, right? The weakest evidence existed where the claims were the most extraordinary. So that realization forced me to confront a larger question. What should a researcher do when the trail goes cold? How should I distinguish between a mystery that deserves further investigation and a story that has drifted beyond what the evidence can support? The Bible is evidence of Christ and him living on earth. I have more evidence that Jesus walked the earth than I do of this conspiracy theory. So the answer to that question may be the most important lesson to me. And one of the dangers of the information age, guys, is that access to data can create the illusion of understanding. We're surrounded by documents, videos, reports, interviews, patents, screenshots, and endless streams of commentary. The sheer volume of information makes it easy to assume that a well-connected narrative must be true. Yet information and evidence are not the same thing. Information is simply raw material. Evidence is information that directly supports a claim. And the distinction sounds simple, but entire theories often collapse when researchers fail to recognize the difference. I put it this way. If you're going to accuse the devil of doing something like this, creating Project Genesis and hooking us all up to the internet by December 2021 or December 2026, flip the switch, we all become zombies, and then Jesus raptures us up. If you're going to make this claim, you better have something. I mean, at least witnesses, whistleblowers, blog after blog after blog of people who heard from someone who worked for something, but nothing is throughout that. You see, entire theories often collapse when researchers fail to recognize the difference. And I repeatedly encountered three categories of statements. The first category consisted of facts. Genesis mission exists. True. We found out what they're doing. They're merging all information about science, consumers. They're putting everything into one searchable database and AI that is going to build and research and then come to new discoveries. That's what it is. Artificial intelligence infrastructure is expanding. True. And data centers are being built. True. Brain-computer interface research is advancing. True, but it's really far off right now. And governments are discussing AI sovereignty. True. These statements are supported by documents, contracts, presentations, public records, and they can be verified independently. And whether a person agrees with their implications is irrelevant because the underlying facts remain accessible. The second category consisted of interpretations. Centralization appears to be increasing, meaning control of AI. It's not for the people. It's not open AI. And artificial intelligence may become a strategic infrastructure layer for the leaders of America. Neural technologies could eventually raise questions about privacy and identity. True. Well, these statements move beyond simple facts and attempt to explain what the facts actually mean. Because interpretations are not inherently wrong. They're just an essential part of research. So the challenge is remembering that interpretations remain interpretations until additional evidence strengthens them. The third category, speculation. Genesis mission is preparing for a rapture event. That's speculation. The Vanishing Protocol is a hidden government framework. Speculation. Sorry. Artificial intelligence has already been integrated into a secret neural control grid. Well, if they had it, they'd be using it on us already, wouldn't they? Well, these claims move beyond the available evidence and propose specific conclusions. And speculation is not automatically false. And every major discovery begins as a possibility before it becomes a certainty. And the problem arises when speculation is presented as established fact before the evidence exists to even support it. got so much more to read, but I just can't get through it, guys. I'm so sorry. If you want to read the rest of this, you're going to have to go to my site. So it's worth returning to the question that started this entire journey, I think. Is the Genesis mission preparing for a rapture of the beast system, a major prophetic event, December 2026? Well, after examining the documents, reviewing the agreement, studying the infrastructure, and tracing the claims back to their sources, the honest answer is this. The evidence does not support that conclusion. Well, at least not yet. But what we found was something simpler, but more significant. A centralized AI system controlled by the government, and they're putting all of the AI information into it. And what will that lead to? Well, we don't know. But the next time that someone tells you that a document proves a prophecy, next time, ask to see the document. Quit trusting blindly in all of these freaking TikToks. Okay? And the next time someone claims a hidden program is changing the world, ask for the evidence. Why is that so wrong? Well, because we're lazy. And the next time a theory asks you to trust a storyteller instead of examining the source for yourself, pause and ask a simple question. Does this claim leave footprints? Because truth always leaves footprints, folks. And our responsibility is not to follow personalities. Our responsibility is to follow the trail.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner. Go to his website, jamescarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.